He thought he was just a muse for her next painting. But that night, beneath the glow of her studio lights, she whispered, "You'll be my masterpiece," and everything changed. I still remember the way the gallery smelled that night, a quiet blend of old wood floors, faint wine, and the subtle sharpness of drying paint. It wasn't a grand exhibition. More like a tucked-away corner of the city where artists showed their work to people who still lingered instead of rushing through. The lights were soft, focused on each canvas as if they were protecting secrets. That's when I saw her. She stood a few steps away from everyone else, in front of a moody oil painting that almost seemed alive under the dim lights. Her shawl, a light silk with muted floral patterns, hung loosely over her arms. Her posture wasn't forced or performative, she had this natural stillness, as if the world slowed down around her. It wasn't her beauty that struck me first, though she was undeniably beautiful in that quiet, ageless way. It was the way she looked at the painting. Focused. Thoughtful. Like she was in conversation with it. I found myself slowing my steps, pretending to study the artwork beside her, though I was really watching her. She noticed, of course. Her eyes shifted to me briefly, dark, steady, with a faint, knowing smile that didn't reach her lips but settled somewhere deeper. "You're staring at the wrong piece," she said softly, her voice warm and low, carrying a quiet confidence. I glanced back at the painting she was studying. "Maybe I'm just waiting for it to reveal its secrets," I replied. She turned fully then, and for a moment, it felt like she was reading between my words, peeling them apart. "Art doesn't reveal," she murmured. "It mirrors." That was our first real moment. No forced small talk. Just this strange, natural rhythm that settled between us. We wandered slowly along the walls, talking in fragments about color, expression, and meaning. She spoke with the ease of someone who'd lived through enough to see beyond surface beauty. Her fingers occasionally traced the air in front of a canvas as she explained a thought, her movements precise but unhurried. In the corner of the gallery, almost hidden behind a pillar, I noticed a forgotten sketch, messy lines, raw and alive. She followed my gaze. "You found it," she whispered, almost to herself. Her expression softened for the first time, and I saw something vulnerable flicker through her calm exterior. That was the moment I knew, meeting her wasn't going to be ordinary. It felt like stepping into a story that had already begun, and I had just arrived at the first page. A week passed before I saw her again, though if I'm honest, she had lingered in my mind far longer than I expected. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, warm sunlight spilling across the cobblestone street, when I found a spot at my usual riverside cafe. I had my sketchbook open, pencil tapping absently against the page as I tried to capture the way the sunlight hit the water. I didn't notice her at first. Not until I heard a soft laugh behind me, low, amused, familiar. "You draw like someone who doesn't want to be interrupted," she said. I turned, and there she was, standing casually with one hand resting on the back of a nearby chair. She wasn't dressed like she had at the gallery. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands framing her face, and she wore a linen shirt that caught the breeze. She looked both effortlessly elegant and completely unguarded, like the world outside her didn't require performance. I smiled, a little caught off guard. "And you speak like someone who'll interrupt anyway." She laughed, properly this time, warm and real, before pulling out the chair across from me. "Guilty," she said, settling in. She leaned forward slightly, one hand on the table, her fingers brushing close to my sketchbook. Her nails had faint smudges of dried paint along the edges. "May I?" I nodded, sliding the book toward her. She flipped through it with quiet attention, her thumb occasionally pausing on a line or shading. "You see light well," she murmured. "Most people try to control it. You let it breathe." I wasn't used to compliments that felt studied. She wasn't just being polite. She understood it. "I'm a painter," she added, almost as an afterthought, though the way her eyes lit up told me it was far from casual. "If you want to see real art, you should come by my studio sometime." Her tone wasn't flirtatious, it was playful, teasing, with a glimmer of challenge. Like she was inviting me into a world where she held the brush and I was the one being observed. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because everything about her felt like stepping across an invisible line. She must have sensed it. She tilted her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Don't overthink it," she said. "It's just art." But something in her gaze told me it would never be just that. Her presence had that rare gravity, the kind that quietly pulls you in until you're standing exactly where you didn't expect to be. Before leaving, she scribbled her address on the corner of my sketchbook. Her handwriting was elegant yet unhurried. "Come by if you're brave enough," she whispered with a smirk that lingered long after she walked away. The day I visited her studio, the city felt unusually still. It was late afternoon, the kind of golden hour where everything looked softer, warmer, as if someone had turned down the sharpness of reality. Her studio was tucked away on the top floor of an old brick building. From the outside, it didn't look like much, a narrow staircase, a single wooden door with flecks of blue paint peeling off. But when she opened it and stepped aside to let me in, it was like walking into another world. The first thing that hit me was the smell, a comforting blend of oil paints, turpentine, and old wood. It wasn't overpowering, it was lived in. The second thing was the light. She had arranged lamps with soft yellow bulbs all around the room, creating a glow that wrapped around the canvases like a quiet embrace. The walls were covered in half-finished paintings, vibrant swirls of color beside delicate pencil sketches. Some leaned casually against the wall, others hung suspended as if mid-thought. She moved barefoot across the paint-splattered floor, her linen dress brushing lightly against her knees. Her hair was loosely tied up, a few strands escaping to frame her face. There was something unguarded about her here, something freer than at the gallery or the cafe. This was clearly her sanctuary. "Don't just stand there," she said with a playful glance over her shoulder. "You're allowed to breathe." I laughed quietly, stepping in. She handed me a cup of tea without asking, her fingers grazing mine as she passed it over. It wasn't an accidental touch. It was light, deliberate, like a painter testing a brushstroke. My heart betrayed me by beating a little too loudly. She began showing me around, each canvas had a story. Some she described in words, others she left hanging in silence, as if the silence said more than she ever could. Eventually, she stopped in front of a blank canvas on an easel near the center of the room. "I need a quick sketch," she said, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. "Nothing serious." I hesitated, but she was already pulling a stool into place. "Sit," she instructed with a soft smile that carried both warmth and command. As she picked up her charcoal, the air between us shifted. Her gaze sharpened, not cold but intensely focused. Her eyes traced my features slowly, deliberately, as if she wasn't just drawing me, she was memorizing me. The scratching sound of charcoal filled the room. Occasionally, she'd glance up, her eyes locking onto mine for a heartbeat longer than necessary. It wasn't flirtation. It was something deeper, curiosity, maybe. Or recognition. In that quiet, surrounded by paint and golden light, I felt something subtle take root, a sense that I had stepped into her world, and that world had already begun to reshape me. What began as a single sketch turned into something more than either of us had planned. Over the next few weeks, her studio became my quiet refuge. After work or on weekends, I'd find myself climbing those narrow stairs again, stepping into that warm, paint-scented attic where time didn't seem to move the way it did outside. She welcomed me each time with that same half-smile, calm, knowing, like she'd expected me long before I knocked. She started painting me in different lights. Sometimes during the soft glow of sunset, sometimes late at night when the only sound was the occasional creak of the floorboards and our steady breathing. She'd position me in ways that forced stillness, a hand resting on my knee, a tilted head, a quiet gaze, then disappear into her world of brushes and color. But in the spaces between the strokes, something else was happening. We were talking. She told stories the way some people paint, with honesty, texture, and restraint. She talked about growing up near the sea, how her father encouraged her to paint, how she once spent an entire summer trying to capture a single sunset. She laughed when she spoke of old mistakes, but there was a softness in her eyes when she mentioned the things that still hurt. One evening, as the rain tapped against the slanted windows, she adjusted my pose. Her hands rested gently on my shoulders, firm enough to guide, tender enough to leave warmth behind. The touch sent a quiet shiver through me, not from surprise, but from the way her presence seemed to anchor me. She stepped back, eyes scanning me thoughtfully. "Hold still," she murmured. But I could tell her attention had shifted from the canvas to something more unspoken between us. Later that night, as thunder rolled distantly, our conversation drifted to deeper places. She told me about her marriage, how it ended with quiet betrayal, not loud fights. Her voice didn't crack, but there was a tremor beneath the calm. She stared at the rain while speaking, as if confessing to the window instead of to me. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. And in that moment, something shifted. She wasn't just an artist, and I wasn't just a muse. We were two people slowly peeling back the layers, finding unexpected solace in each other's presence. As I left that night, the street still wet, her voice echoed in my mind, not the words, but the softness behind them. It felt like the beginning of trust, fragile yet quietly powerful. The evening that changed everything started differently. When I climbed the familiar staircase to her studio, I noticed the door was already slightly ajar, as if she'd been expecting me. A faint golden glow spilled out into the hallway, but this time it wasn't the usual warm lamplight. When I stepped inside, I stopped in my tracks. The studio looked transformed. Dozens of candles were scattered across tables, windowsills, and the floor, their soft flames dancing gently against the walls. Shadows and light intertwined, giving the room a kind of quiet intimacy that made my chest tighten. The scent of melting wax mixed with the ever-present aroma of oil paint. And then I saw her. She stood by the easel, wearing a simple black dress that fell effortlessly against her figure. Her hair was down for the first time, loose waves catching the candlelight. There were faint paint smudges on her wrists, traces of her world, imperfect and beautiful. When she turned toward me, her eyes held something different, a quiet intensity, a wordless dare. "You're early," she said softly, though her smirk suggested she'd been ready for this moment. I managed a laugh, though it came out uneven. "Should I come back?" "No," she whispered, stepping closer. "Stay." She circled around me slowly, like an artist studying a sculpture, her fingers grazing the collar of my shirt to adjust it. Her touch was feather-light, but it sent a heat through my chest I couldn't ignore. She tilted my chin slightly, her eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us thickened, not with words, but with awareness. "I want to paint something raw tonight," she said. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice lower than usual. She leaned in, close enough for her breath to brush my neck. She whispered. I froze, not out of discomfort, but because the room itself seemed to still. The sound of rain outside, the candle crackle, even my own heartbeat felt louder than my voice. She stepped back just enough to pick up her brush but didn't break eye contact. As she began sketching, she stayed close, occasionally adjusting my pose with the lightest touch, fingers grazing my jaw, tracing the line of my arm to reposition it. Every touch lingered just a second longer than it needed to, and every glance between us carried something unspoken. The tension wasn't rushed. It built in quiet, steady waves, the kind that doesn't demand attention but commands it. In that moment, surrounded by flickering light, I wasn't just her muse anymore. I was the center of her gaze, her creation, and something far more dangerous, her desire made visible through silence. Hours must have passed, though inside that candlelit studio, time lost its usual rhythm. The sketch had turned into a painting now, strokes layered with emotion I could almost feel pressing against my skin. She moved with a quiet urgency, occasionally stepping closer to study me, her breath brushing past my cheek, her fingers steadying my jaw as if afraid that even the smallest movement might ruin something delicate. When she finally stepped back from the canvas, her expression had changed. The usual playful smirk was gone. In its place was something raw, vulnerable, almost hesitant. She set her brush down carefully, as if buying herself a moment. Then she turned toward me. "You should look," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I stood slowly and moved beside her. On the canvas, it wasn't just my face she'd painted. It was the way she saw me, the warmth in the eyes, the slight tension in the jaw, the softness she'd coaxed into colors. There was something deeply intimate in every brushstroke. I looked at her, but she didn't look away this time. "You've become more than a subject to me," she whispered. Her hands fidgeted slightly, a rare break in her usual composure. "When I paint you, it's not just art anymore. It's everything I didn't know I'd buried." Her honesty hit me harder than I expected. My throat tightened, my heartbeat stumbling over itself. I'd been carrying feelings quietly, tucked behind playful remarks and silent admiration. But hearing her say it first, hearing the tremor in her voice, made it real. "I feel it too," I finally said, my voice low but firm. "I didn't plan to. I don't even know when it happened. But every time I walk through that door, something in me settles." A small, almost disbelieving smile tugged at her lips. She stepped closer, slowly, giving me every chance to step back, but I didn't. Her hands lifted hesitantly, then cupped my face, thumbs brushing against my cheeks. Her touch was warm, gentle, but it carried the weight of everything left unsaid between us. I placed my hands over hers, not to stop her, but to hold her there. For a moment, we just breathed together. No clever words. No teasing smiles. Just quiet, trembling honesty. She leaned her forehead against mine, eyes closing. "I was afraid," she whispered. "So was I breathed." And in that fragile moment, between candlelight and confession, something shifted permanently, not loud or dramatic, but steady, like a truth finally allowed to exist. The following morning, the city woke under a pale gold sky, but inside her studio, time still felt suspended. Candles had burned down to soft puddles of wax, their faint scent lingering like the memory of the night before. She moved quietly through the space, barefoot as always, her black dress replaced by a loose shirt that hung effortlessly off one shoulder. Her hair was still slightly messy from the night, and for the first time, she didn't seem to care. She stood in front of the canvas, her arms folded, studying it in silence. I joined her, shoulder to shoulder. The painting was complete now. Not just a portrait, a story. She hadn't painted me as a flawless subject. She'd painted how I felt through her eyes, a mixture of strength and stillness, vulnerability tucked beneath composure. The colors were unlike any I'd seen her use before, softer, warmer, alive. There were delicate strokes that hinted at moments we shared, the curve of my jaw softened by her gaze, the way light kissed my hair during late evenings, the quiet steadiness of my posture under her eyes. She exhaled slowly. "This is the first piece in years that feels honest," she said. I looked at her, and there was no teasing smile, no playful deflection. Just sincerity. "Because it is honest," I said quietly. Her eyes met mine, and for a long moment, neither of us needed to speak. There was a quiet safety in that gaze, something built carefully over conversations, touches, and the spaces between words. "You'll always be my masterpiece," she whispered finally. This time, her voice didn't carry the mischievous lilt from the night we met. It carried weight, soft but steady, like a promise. I reached for her hand slowly, not out of boldness but instinct. She didn't pull away. Our fingers intertwined naturally, her thumb tracing slow circles against my skin. We stood there in silence, bathed in the soft light of dawn spilling through the attic windows. The birds outside were beginning their morning chorus, faint and distant. The air was cool, but between us, there was warmth, quiet, real, unspoken. She leaned her head gently against my shoulder, and I felt her relax fully for the first time. No walls, no performance. Just us. I realized then that this wasn't a fleeting moment or a passing attraction. It was the quiet unfolding of two lives that had collided in an unexpected corner of the world and found something worth holding on to. Her masterpiece wasn't the painting on the canvas. It was this, the shared stillness, the warmth of her hand in mine, the sunrise that belonged to both of us now.